Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today in our Lunch and Learn series, a series with the Wholebeing Institute, we're going to be speaking with Rick Prater, and we're going to be learning about how to design real life change. Rick asked the question, have you found yourself tired, overwhelmed, and without willpower as we move into fall? Let's face it, change can be challenging, especially when the pandemic has diminished our willpower. Rick is going to talk today about how we can create new behaviors to accomplish our goals. We will discuss the 4-step process to success. 1, keep it simple. 2, narrow your focus. 3, find a routine. And 4, practice. Reminds me of that joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Let me let you know a little bit about Rick. Rick Prater is an industrial designer. He lives and works in New York City. He's applying his human-centered design approach to drive innovation and growth for some of the world's leading businesses. And for 7 years, he has mentored and trained individuals on how to apply design methodology to their own work and lives. He shares them in his new book, Our Design Challenge, for anyone who feels stuck by life's obstacles, struggles, or traumas. Rick, welcome to the call. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about this important topic, which is, ugh, I feel stuck. What do I do now? This is not what we were talking about a little bit before, which is surge capacity. When this first started, the pandemic started, it was like, is it going to be, I remember the JCC, we were saying, well, let's close for two weeks and then see what happens. And that was, we closed early. We closed early on in March. And no one at that time, if I think back in March, predicted that this would go on as long as it was. So everybody kind of had this surge of energy and like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we got it. And not only that, it was like, there was even a lot of things like, okay, what are the things? This is a time to work on things. This is a time to get, organized and redo my closets and read those books and like focus on losing weight and maybe I can save money and like all of these things that I always wanted to do. And yeah, that hasn't exactly happened. So give us some context for maybe why or how design can help us in this situation.
Well, I'm in the same boat with everybody because I actually started the exact same way. I did a presentation here to talk about design methodology, design thinking, and how you could apply it to your life. And I'm kind of an ADHD type of person, ADHD. So design is perfect for me because I'm a taskmaster and I can get a lot of stuff done. So I started the exact same way. And I think probably it was a level of fear about a pandemic that I wasn't really facing. I didn't want to face the fact that I didn't know what change, we talked about change, what change was going to happen. So I went into task mode of what I could do. And I think that's actually kind of natural when people go into a survival mode and they just start doing tasks as opposed to stopping and figuring out what they're going to do. So what I wanted to go over today is how we could design some rituals and habits to give ourselves some rest. I did all the tasks and stuff like that, and it basically brought me to a crash essentially. And I didn't put enough time in there for rest, relaxation, and building up, like you had the conversation on Tuesday, to build up resilience, to prepare for the long haul, and then to utilize the time not for tasks, but to say, where do I want to go after this? Because it will end. We know it will end. Eventually it'll end. We don't know when, but it will. And I'd like to be, as everybody else, in hopefully a better place, or at least position myself where I am energetic enough to move myself into a better place whenever it lifts, it lifts. And we can do that.
Yeah, and I love that you brought in the talk from Tuesday. It was really interesting to me to have this discussion around resilience and about, wait a second, we have to think about filling up the gas tank as we go and enjoying the journey on the way. And also this idea that we need to interrupt, right, and rest. We can't be on all the time. It can't be our executive functioning and being on task and on task and on task all the time. We're not even designed to do that way. Our biology isn't designed to do that way. Yet,
correct.
If we're anxious and we want to control, we want to get into the doingness of this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how the doingness of that, or that it seems natural, right, to do that, kind of led to, as you said, the crisis that you experienced, and then falling back into your design background to help you out of that.
Well, I think that what we're kind of describing is like, how did I end up getting to my crash, so to speak? And I started with doing tons and tons of tasks. You know, I redesigned. I was going to be working at home. I redesigned an office space like so many other people did. I came up, you know, obviously gyms closed. I like to go to the gym in the morning just for my own mental well-being. I came up with exercising tasks, revisited recipes, found ways of, you know, meeting with friends and stuff like that via Zoom. So all of that was really great for a period of time. But then what I think happened is that I was doing tasks, but I didn't actually state or really look at the fact that there was some real change happening, and then change happening actually in how I did it. And I was trying to compensate, you know, my old life with tasks to replicate it. What I didn't normally do, and how it kind of fell apart, is, you know, I have habits and rituals like everybody else does, which I think are really important because they ground your life, and they really do help, like we were talking about resilience, give you resilience because they give your body and your mind a point of rest. It's like a home. Home is where the heart is, and if you have an ability to rest, you have an ability to revitalize yourself, you have ability to build up resilience. So habits and rituals can help you do that. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is like the importance of design in building habits and rituals. And for me, I've always had pretty good habits and rituals. You know, that's kind of what I do. I do behavioral design for people. But the tasks that I was doing didn't really change. I modified tasks to fill up space, but I didn't talk about the real change. We're going to talk about that, what was going on in the pandemic. So for me, having good habits, it was a slow slip. Like I normally didn't in the weekdays pre-pandemic. I didn't watch TV, but you know, now I had a whole bunch of time, and if I wasn't on Zoom calls, which get boring after a while, no offense, but I would go watch Netflix in the evening, which I never really started doing. Nothing wrong with that. But then, you know, Netflix, one show comes on and then the next show comes on. And before you know it, I would be up, you know, a little bit later than I normally did. And while you're watching TV, you know, I'd be making popcorn or eating something while I'm doing it. Nothing wrong with that, you know, any of that. But then I also have a ritual of getting up really early in the morning the next day. So I would wake up really groggy because it's set. You know, I don't even have to set an alarm clock. I'm just one of those people that gets up early. So I'd wake up groggy, then have to have too much coffee, then try to be productive at work, and I couldn't be as productive what I was doing. My exercise schedule, I started by compensating not going to the gym by doing all the things that are easy for me. I have great lower body strength. I'm great with resilience. So I jogged, did the stairwell when I was raining outside, learned to jump rope a lot, which is great, but I didn't take in the fact that how old I am. And your knees wear out after a while doing that kind of stuff, particularly when you're trying to burn stress. So it was kind of cumulative because, you know, the evenings got later and later. The morning was still early. I was still tired. I wasn't productive. I was gaining weight. You know, things kind of didn't collapse. Nobody's collapsed, but they just kind of left me with the feeling of ick and not the resources that I needed to have the resilience, to have a level of, you know, going back to my home, to my heart, and kind of enjoying it. And so by getting off of what my rituals were and not adapting them to the new situation, I was kind of like not a mess, but I needed to regroup it. We all have tools, and we all have a toolbox in our tools, but sometimes I think they need to be evaluated, and I really needed to evaluate mine because, you know, a toolbox filled with a bunch of hammers is only useful for what? Breaking up a boulder. and my tools weren't working anymore, and my habits fell apart, and I needed to get them regrouped so I could have an semblance of living in today, but having a goal. You know what I mean? Goal, I'm not talking about just business goal or life goal or whatever. Something that moves me forward, that I could look forward to. Something that anything that I could actually look forward to when the pandemic ends, that I could have something that I was working for towards joy and purpose. It's easy to get involved with work and tasks and all the things that we have to get done. It's better to get involved with something that you can have agency and kind of initiate and say, I'm actually enjoying working on something that's improving myself or something that I want to be into. That I think gives you some future focus. It does me. So.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I wonder if we could just put in the chat, and I will do this, if any of you out there have had a similar experience where, you know, you change things in just a little way, like Rick, you find yourself staying up just a little bit later and you're still getting up early, and suddenly you're more tired, or you're drinking more coffee, or, you know, I have never watched Netflix. We don't even have a television, but suddenly someone gave us a Roku stick or something. And I wasn't feeling well one day. I think I watched this show Glee. Have you heard of this show Glee? It's from ages ago, right? I think I watched an entire day of Glee. And my niece walked by and she goes, "What are you doing?" She was not used to seeing me that. So if you guys experience that, please put in the chat some of the things that you have found yourself doing that you have never done. Habits that, not that they're judging, I enjoyed it, but it just wasn't healthy for me in the long run to do that. And then the brain, right? That was enjoyable and that was pleasurable. I kind of wanted to do it the next day. And that's what I hear you saying. And
yeah.
So I think to normalize it for everyone, if you've been in that experience, or if you've had, like Laura Siegel says, ice cream. Yeah. Right. It's like, wait a second. And then you have to talk yourself down from, wait a minute, I can't have that every single day, a pint of ice cream. Right. So I think this is important, because it's the small changes make you can experience big results with it, and a big difference. So thank you, Rick. I think this is going to be really a fascinating conversation.
Perfect. So what I did when I realized that, you know, I wasn't in trouble, I just wasn't feeling good about myself, you know, gained weight, was not bouncing back, lost my sparkle, you know, all the typical stuff that everybody's going through during the pandemic. And, you know, there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world that we need to be as optimistic and face the world with as much, you know, happiness as we possibly can, or resilience. So I decided to do something about it. And what I did is I started evaluating my habits and rituals. And that, I think, helped bring me back to center, because you can actually design them. You don't just it's not just a task that you have to do. So what I wanted to do is go over how important design is in building up habits and rituals. And if people want to build up resilience, they want to build up happiness, or they're going through that, you know, that brain fog or fatigue that the pandemic can cause, that they can give themselves some resting points by building up some easy times in their day when they can just coast. So part of the opening that we went through, when I'm working with clients, I work in design. So I think more of a design point. And I wanted to break down some of the what I would call misconceptions. I don't actually fear change. I actually, being a designer, most designers actually like change. So I'll get into that. And then I wanted to get into the misconception about willpower, then break down the importance of how you can apply design to building habits and rituals, and then give people the 4 simple steps and process, maybe take some questions, and then give some closing statements. So first of all, to break it down, we talked about in the intro, willpower. I think that's exactly how I started the tasks with willpower. I'm going to power through the pandemic. I'm going to get all of this stuff done, and I'm going to use the willpower. And then the willpower shot, basically. And that's something, willpower is not a good thing to rely on, because it is like a muscle that can get sore. It can wear down, it can break, it can crack. You get older, your willpower changes. It's not what you want to rely on. You could, design trumps willpower always. And I can show you how that works. Tons of industries work on the concept of willpower. You know, like just think about gyms, gym memberships, diets, self-help. They all kind of play on the fact that your willpower will wear out, but you bought a gym membership all, you know, for the entire year. It just doesn't work. And I also think that our society comes up with sayings and stuff that enforce willpower, like fake it till you make it. And even though I really don't agree with that, I think I was doing that in the beginning of the pandemic. And I think it's a mistake, because what I learned is that you're lying to yourself while you're trying to fake it, as opposed to facing it until you make it. And then you're not really building up a real relationship with yourself. You're just continually lying. And lying, you know, you're not building up relationships with people around you either, because you're trying to fake it. And the faking part all comes with relying on your willpower. And if your willpower gets exhausted, then you failed. And a lot of your lunch and learns have been about Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset. When your willpower fails, or you're faking it till you make it and you fail, and everybody has slips with diets and stuff like that, it's continual reinforcement that you're doing it wrong, you know. And then the continual reinforcement of having to push your willpower is basically saying there's something wrong with you. And the difference between designing something is design always starts with it's kind of neutral. It starts where you are and then just tries to improve it. And that's why when I was reevaluating my tools, I started with that, because there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. I could still be lying in bed, you know, eating popcorn and Netflix, but it's not exactly what I want to do with my life. It's not an semblance of a life. You know, much like you were saying about Glee, you know, it's fun watching it for a day, but maybe even two, but do you want to spend the rest of your life watching Glee? You know, I want to be an active, vital person.
Yeah, I think that is so important.
Yeah.
That you're an important point that you're making, Rick. It's not that we don't want to personalize this.
No.
Even though it's about us, we want to really have, it's like with what mindfulness teaches us. We want to have that objectivity. We want to be able to look at what we're doing from a design perspective and say, wait a second, is this working for me?
Yeah.
Or what can I shift and what can I change? My friend likes to say, Winnie Zeeb, she likes to say, shift happens, you know, and what can I shift? What can I change? Or what have I changed and that's making a difference? And I know that for one thing that my husband's kept really consistent about is going to bed at a certain time. And that's just been something that's been really helpful for him.
I think those kind of rituals are really important. And that's what I realized when I was really, how important they were to me and how trying to get back to them are really important. So that's why we want to give people some key points of why habits and rituals are important, and how you can use them, how you can activate them, and how you can apply them. So forget about willpower and forcing yourself to do something. Let's concentrate on the design part of it, because design actually does trump willpower. Secondly, I wanted to talk about change, if you don't mind. You know, people always, you know, the introduction, because every time I face a client or I'm in an industry that creates change. So, and design thinking, designers normally view change as an evaluation point. They don't view it as a problem. They view it as a turning point and actually something that's good. Because change is actually inevitable. And we were talking a little bit before about fall. Fall is a perfect example. It's getting colder, the leaves are changing. There's nothing, and it's beautiful in New York when it's fall. There's nothing we can do about it. It's inevitable. But people always state that they're scared of change or the challenge of change. And I've had the same problem myself, but I think the reminder of reminding people that change is inevitable is really important. When I'm working with clients, I always try to keep it open and then try to like move them towards understanding that change is inevitable and can be a very good thing. And that's what I'd kind of like to do today, to show people that change is actually good. Arthur Ashe, if you don't mind, I'll read it. Arthur Ashe had a quote, which I think is perfectly comes up with what design thinks. He stated for change, most people resist change even when it promises to be for the better. But change will come, and if we acknowledge this simple but undisputed fact in life and understand that we must adjust to all change, then we will have a head start. And I think that's an excellent way of looking at it, to try not to be scared of change. And when I'm working with clients and I'm working with people to change their behavior, I realize the obstacle of how they think of change is what the problem is. Most people think of change as a problem. And we're going through a lot of change. And yes, there are problems with it. But I think the reason why design is important in this part is because design views it as a change into a different direction to go into. And then you can choose a direction that's positive. When people think of it as a problem, they normally highlight critical thinking, which basically just takes things down, picks them apart, and then doesn't put them back together, where design kind of constructs. Or analytical thinking, which basically is like engineering thinking, where you have a really great idea in your head and you want it to look like that, and you move towards that. And both of those thinkings rely on willpower, which we just discussed doesn't work, or can wear out and wear out your resistance. And they basically, they're all linear, and they're all black and white thinking. And life isn't really like that. Design is more circular, and it's not as black and white thinking, because it's continually working on it. So I think when I'm talking about this, I'm viewing change as something as positive and good, so a turning point, so you can make a change in the right direction. So that's how I'm viewing change, and working on that every day too.
And Rick, I just wanted to point out a wonderful conversation that's going on in the chat. I asked the question, what have you found yourself doing during the pandemic that surprised you? And some people wrote, when I retired, I had to transition to a new life. When the pandemic came, I bought a monitor so I could participate with Zoom calls. And some people said, well, I'm watching too much TV, especially the news. And of course, Laura said ice cream. For connections during COVID, so many webinars and Zooms. And some people said, again, overdosing on the news, which led to being depressed. And something sweet or dried fruits like a reward until it's not. And then back to the true routine, everything in moderation, plus a great workout routine. And then, of course, I reminded them that what you said, which I loved, which was design trumps willpower, and face it until you make it, which is, in positive psychology, we talk about the importance of authenticity, authentic leadership, being authentically yourself, being seen. Lisa was commenting that she thought it might be very difficult to transition back when things normalize. And then Lois had a great story. She said, I definitely spent 12 hours a day at first watching TV. But then I progressed and started cooking. I purged everything I own and completely redid my humble abode, home edit. Got rid of 7 bags of clothing, purses, papers, reframed my life. As I was forced into retirement in March, I kept off 33 pounds. All in all, I thrived during the pandemic. And then, right, and then Bunny was saying, wow, that's great. And Lois was saying, thanks, I feel so much lighter. And then Manish said, I started a lunch and learn session in Hong Kong following JC's example.
Very good.
Wonderful. And he did a wonderful session with us on laughter yoga. So what I love about your design thinking is that it reminds me of how people do things. Some people started the pandemic with a lot of good habits and willpower and all those kind of things. And then some people didn't, and then progressed to doing it better. And some people, it all happens. It reminds me of what you were talking about with change, of a wave. The ocean, right? A wave gathers energy, it crests, and then it crashes, and then it comes back into itself and again. So we have these cycles, and nature teaches us that we're designed to go through these cycles. We're not designed to be on and perfect the whole time. So I love what you're talking about. I think it's really important.
And we're designed to hopefully adapt to them as well. We are designed for change. I mean, because everything is changing around us. So it's our way of thinking about it that sometimes we need to put a different hat on. That's basic. There's nothing wrong with any form of thinking, but sometimes you put on a different hat and you see the world a little bit different. But going back to the statement of like design trumps willpower, I wanted to show people a little bit, give them like a little bit of an example of how it does. We've all, you know, even now if you have to do it with a mask, we've all been grocery shopping. I would love to give people like a little bit of an assignment to go to a grocery store to see exactly how a grocery store is laid out. You know, you have your produce, the meat on one side, and all the aisles through it. We've all gone with a list in there with just specific things that we wanted to get, needed to get, but have purchased, been enticed to purchase things like candy bars at the checkout, cookies, or something. That's called choice architecture. They're like kind of helping you make that decision. So design can trump willpower. It does trump willpower. And that's a good thing to realize. I think it's a really good thing to go to a grocery store to actually see the power of it, because if they can do it, if the websites can do it, if stores can do it, that means that you can do it for yourself. And that's something that you can specifically design if you want to create any change where you don't have to. And then what I mean by willpower is making a choice. Like if you wanted to not eat cookies, get rid of the cookies out of your house so you have no choice but to go outside and get more cookies. If you make it really hard, you're not going to do it. And then I wanted to go into like, why are rituals and habits so important for us? Like my example, if you don't design good habits and rituals will design you. And sometimes that's not so good. So it's much better for you to have the focus and control on it and at least evaluate something. So before things like spin out, you can do something about it. Also, your brain loves patterns and connecting things together, and it loves rituals, because what it essentially wants to do is create comfort for itself. Your brain wants to create comfort and go on to autopilot or low-level thinking, so you don't have to make so many choices, and it can rest. We all need rest nowadays. You brought up a really good example on Tuesday about driving in a car for resilience, how you can prepare for the car with gas, prepare your journey, and then prepare yourself on the inside. I thought that was a great example and wanted to kind of like add on to that for automation. You know, I used to drive upstate like every single weekend. I had a house upstate that I unfortunately sold before the pandemic. Bad timing. Didn't plan on a pandemic. But anyway, but when I would drive, you know, getting out of the city, anybody that lives here, getting out of the city is a challenge. Getting on the Sawmill is a challenge. I would get on the Taconic. So on a beautiful day, the Taconic, if you get used to it, is a dream. It's a drive. It's a nice drive. So once I hit the Taconic, it was like a signal point for me to start relaxing, because I could enjoy the drive. And then I had an hour and a half, depending, 2 hours. I'd be there with, it seemed like just a few minutes. And if I went to dinner that evening, somebody would say, "Oh my God, did you see that new barn on the Taconic exit?" Not the Taconic, but the Ankrum exit. And I would not really remember much of the trip. And we've all had an experience like that. That's a perfect example of your brain basically going on autopilot, where it's on rest. You're not, you know, if there was a wreck and something in front of you, you would wake up like that. But you're not making any decisions and choices. You're in a safe environment. You know what to do, and your brain kind of like tears down a little bit. We all need rituals, particularly now, to create them so we can give our brain a rest, because we're all under a little bit of stress. So designing for automation, you can design for automation. And I'll give you some examples of how you can do that, and easily and quickly. So if you design, the benefit for designing for automation, I think, is kind of like meditation. You know, meditation can take years and stuff to get used to. I meditate, we all meditate. The idea of it is that it gives you focus. You know, you understand exactly why you're doing it. You're controlling your breathing. You're focusing on something, and if a thought comes into your mind, you're kind of moving it aside, and you get the idea of like, oh, wait a second, I'm in charge here. I can push the emotion aside or move it aside and still feel it, but not get a visceral feeling of it. So you get the effect of that I'm in charge of my brain. Habits and rituals, like when you set it up to give your brain a rest, you're the one that's in charge of it. So I think it's important, particularly now, that we have habits and rituals like in the evening, in the morning, or wherever you need them, so you can give your brain a rest, so you can build in resilience and joy and happiness and all those things that we need. So just to clarify, like during my crash and stuff like that, that's what I realized that I wasn't doing. I messed up my rituals. I messed up my whole schedule. I was creating too much noise and action, and then I was, gaining weight, not sleeping well. It was just a slow burn. It was a slow crash, and that's why I wasn't feeling good about myself. So it wasn't the rituals that failed me. It was the fact that I failed them, and I needed to reevaluate them and redo them. So the best way designed for automation is to remember exactly what we talked before, design trumps willpower. So there were 4 things that really happened during my crash. I ate too much. My eating habits got really messy. My sleeping habits were horrible. My productivity was bad. And the goal and wish, why I sold my house, which was to purchase something else, was kind of being pushed back, and pushed back. So I decided to reevaluate it and reevaluate all my habits and stuff like that and focus on the 4 things: nutrition, sleep, productivity. And I chose finances because if you start purchasing something, that means you're making a big commitment. You're not just pushing it off.
Rick, I wanted to go back to one thing that you said, and it reminds me of a quote by Tal Ben-Shahar that I'm putting in the chat. We either learn to fail or we fail to learn. And that failure is an inescapable part of life and critically important part of a successful life. So one of the things that's happening, and to normalize it for everybody in the pandemic, is, and like Laura was noted in the chat at the beginning of the shutdown, I did great, but then I had to schedule Zoom meditation, lunch and learn, exercise, or early morning walks. But then as things began to open up, I had to start engaging with more life responsibilities, right? Sometimes our life gets interrupted. I know for me, that's happened too. Some of us have experienced someone's passing, or their life gets interrupted. So there isn't the expectation. And what I love about what you're talking about is that everything's going to go along smoothly. It's like, wait a second, I'm not able to do this or that. And we have to be able to adjust to that. And that's what that growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about so much, is why that comes into play. And even in our mindfulness, there's different methods and ways that we can use mindfulness techniques and meditation. But what I hear you saying is like, okay, how do I look at this from a design perspective? What was working? What wasn't working? What did I change? And what do I really want? And I loved what you said about noise, because in NIA, we study music both as the sounds that we're hearing and the silence. So if we think about music as being sounds that are births from silence, and we think about design, and it sounds like you're heading that direction, as what is too busy, or what has too much clutter in it, and what do I need to look at that? Again, not to shame myself or blame myself, but to say, wait a second, from a structural point of view, where is there too much noise?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And also, all the things that you're talking about, like meditation stuff, that can take years to get to the point where you're actually moving your thoughts aside. But when you design something, when you force a choice, like, design trumps willpower, or you force automation, you can do it in a matter of minutes. And the difference between that, contemplative, I'm not, I think I meditate myself. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I recommend it to anybody. The difference between design is that you can do it quickly, and it can take you to a different point fairly quickly as well. So, the 4 things I wanted to work on for myself was nutrition, sleep, productivity, and finances. Those are the things that I wanted to focus on to give myself a sense of normalcy. Of course, I was working and doing other things at the time and dealing with other life issues, but those are the things that kind of spun out of control. So if I was going to force automation and then put design as opposed to willpower, and willpower again, I'm making the selection of the choice. Like for nutrition, I got rid of all the candies, popcorn, cookies, all the things that I shouldn't be eating, and just got rid of them. Because if I have to go down to the store and wait in line with the mask on and stuff like that, it takes time to do that. So you're probably not going to do it if you don't have them in your house. And I love to entertain, so I have lots of different kind of, or used to during pre-pandemic. So I have lots of different kind of plates and platters and stuff to use, but I put all those in a different closet. So the only plates I can get to are small plates, salad plates, and small bowls. So my portion control automatically went down. So it was affecting my nutrition right away and how much I ate by just really simple things, getting rid of the bad stuff so I didn't see it, it wasn't around, and affecting the size of the plates. That's pushing, that's forcing automation, and that's design trumps willpower. And then for sleep, that one can be a little bit harder, but I did something really simple, get rid of the TV out of the bedroom. Because that's what I was doing. I was watching TV in bed. I just got rid of it. And then I needed to set it, I needed to get back on schedule, kind of give myself a little bit of back on schedule. So I started putting an alarm and a shutdown on my phone. And then I got some switches for lights, where the lights shut off. So it's just a very visual clues are really important to tell you, okay, it's time to make some change. And then that was my clue to time to get to bed, because I know I'm going to be up at 5 or 6 anyway. So now I have those visual clues. If I don't make it, I don't make it. But at least I know that's what I'm supposed to do. And it has really been working. And then for productivity, I deleted like all games from my phone. And then I put a blocker for social media. And before I did this talk, I thought about that. And I did a little research on social media. Do you know the average American spends 2 hours a day on social media? That's over 700 hours a year. So if you cut your social media by 50%, that's 350 hours, which I think is about 2 months of work, 40 hours a week. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time to work on meditation, staying with your family, having fun with your kids. That's, doesn't just need to be work. And another thing that I worked on for productivity, which I've used in the past, but I really started to accelerate it, was the Pomodoro technique, which is, as a timer. I use Be Focused on my phone. You work for 25 minutes, you have 5 minutes off. But if you do it I don't do it all day long, some people do, but I do it for a couple of hours when I'm working, and it really does keep you focused. And then for finances, the reason I selected finances, because I sold my house and my car because I was going through a life change, but also I wanted to activate another one, purchase a home somewhere else. Nothing makes that come true better than buying something. Like, saving up for something, putting a down payment on something. Nothing makes the dream come true more than actually having to tangibly do something. So that's why I picked finances. And then I just basically called service providers, started saving some money, got the rates lowered, cable, phone, stuff like that, and started moving the money aside for a move and flights when I can fly. And then started taking 10% out of my salary and started moving that aside with the, the money I have for my house. So it's going to be all ready when the pandemic is done, and I can slip into where I want to go. And it's not much, it doesn't sound like anything, but at least it's activated the fact that, oh, I can make this happen and work on it during a pandemic. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it will happen eventually. So when I'm talking about, design trumps willpower, I forced the design to do that. And then I forced the design, or used the design, to activate automation. I started it by saying, when I go in the kitchen, I'm going to food, I'm automatically getting smaller plates, smaller bowls, smaller portions. I'm forcing all of those things to happen as a reminder. And those things have really, really worked slowly to help keep me on track. There are 4 things, I just wanted to go over the 4 things that really cement a habit and a ritual. And I think we know these ones, or I'll go over them to you. It's practice, habits, are based on frequency, not time. So don't worry about that rule of like you have to do it for 10,000 hours. You can do it, if you stack them onto something good, you can do it in a couple of weeks. Stability and context. If you do it at the same time in a stable context, a safe environment, if you do it in a sporadic environment, it won't work. Positive emotions. If it feels good, you're going to do it again. And reward system. It basically proves that it's working for you. So that's a lot of information, but I wanted to kind of give you an example of how that.
What are the 4 things again? I'll write them in the chat for everybody.
Sure. Practice. Habits are based on frequency, not time. Stable context. If the context is changing, the behavior is changing. Positive emotions. If it feels good, you're going to do it again. And then rewards. It's basically proof that it's working. So that's, there's a lot of information, pushing design trumps willpower, pushing for automation, designing for automation, and these 4 things. But I just wanted to remind everybody that you've already done this. And I'd like to ask you for another little a homework thing. It's basically a task analysis. Most people that I've worked with in business, if I have to do a task analysis or if I'm working on a personal, people say that it's a lot of process to do, but it actually has a lot of benefit. If everybody could just take a piece of paper out and a pencil, you can do that after the session, and then write down, my morning ritual, and then start with, when your eyes open on the pillow, to everything that you do when you walk out the door. One of the guests mentioned that she was retired. You can do this before you're retired when you're going to work. It doesn't need to be time specific, but just kind of remember everything you do. And when I mean eyes open from the pillow, lifting your head, moving your body over, putting your feet down on the ground, taking, 8 steps to the bathroom, lifting the light switch up, all the tiny little tasks. Just 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be that specific, but you'll be surprised how many choices and activity your brain goes through just to get you out the door. You will be surprised of the pages that you come up with. And I think it's important to see that, because if you think of your morning ritual, you've already done the 4 things. You've practiced it over time. You've done it in a stable context, in the privacy and the safety of your own home. You were rewarded positively because it worked, because you did it. And you have positive emotions for it. So you've done this before. I'm just kind of helping you mold it and design it and reanalyze it so you can do it again. And when you do the task analysis for your morning ritual, I would save this piece of paper, because I know it sounds anal. It sounds kind of weird that you put it with, I don't know if you have to put it with your will and your health proxy, but it is important, because when I went through my thing, I pulled mine out and I could see the flaws. I could see it very clearly. It's very easy to talk to you about it now, but when you're tired, you're not thinking, you're lethargic, you're wondering if it's the news or if it's what's going on with the election, what's all happening. When you look at it in black and white and you realize, oh, I'm getting up later, I'm eating poorly, I've totally missed my schedule. If I design this and try to get back to it, let's see how I feel. And then when I started evaluating it and pushing design forward, design trumps willpower, things started rectifying themselves. So I would recommend that people do a task analysis, do this morning ritual analysis, and keep it. And remind yourself, I was saying before, it sticks if it feels good. You should feel good about that, because you've already done this. So all we have to do now is to modify what you want to do. Take some of these principles and remember how to do them. So we talked in the beginning of how simple it can be to create a new habit or ritual. And I came up with a program for myself, and I use it with other people, that it's a SNAP. So it's simple, narrow, accessible, and practice. So keep it simple, narrow your focus, be absolutely specific, and practice. That's SNAP. And I always do it with the SNAP, because remember when I was talking about the taconic and automation, how I had a trigger to start relaxing, which was hitting the taconic, or not hitting it, but driving on it. Visual clues, auditory clues are really important when you're starting a new habit. They will help you do it much quicker. So when I was reworking mine, I realized one of the things, you know, the 3 things I wanted to work on were nutrition, sleep schedule, and productivity and finance as well. All of those things kind of line up because my nutrition, productivity, and sleep schedule were really kind of affected by my fitness. Because I was doing lower body work, but I was blowing out my knees. So I just wasn't doing it to the energy or the frequency. So I decided to do some upper body work, you know, and focus on that and then kind of stretch myself a little bit. So I just forced myself to do the SNAP, and I would wake up in the morning, snap, literally snap my fingers, get out of bed, do 10 push-ups, and then continue with my routine. That way I would start the routine of start working on lower body, because I wasn't really in the mind frame to do that. I was just stuck in my old habits. So the signal was SNAP. I was, it's very simple, 10 push-ups. I wanted to work on upper body. I was narrowed the focus, upper body. I was absolutely specific with what I did, get out of bed and do it. And then I practiced. And the point I wanted to make is that the reason why I did it in the morning, I know, is like get out of bed and do 10 push-ups. But if you have a routine that you're already really good at, and I was reworking my morning routine to be good at it, if you stack onto success, your success rate will go 50% higher. So if you're doing a new habit or a routine, if you're really good in the morning, at night, or at night, do it then, because your success rate will be much higher. And then once you get used to doing it, then you can change the time frame a little bit. Then I moved the push-ups when I was doing exercising after breakfast and stuff like that. But always start by stacking success, and then it'll make, and then just do it in a snap, and it'll make the process much, much, much faster. You'll get into the habit quicker, and it'll become a ritual. If they used to say, what, 10,000 hours, you probably can do it in 2 to 3 weeks if you do it correctly.
Wow, that's amazing, Rick.
Well,
I mean, you know, and I bet, how many push-ups have you done?
Well, it took me,
you know, 10.
Well, I know.
10.
Well, I can
Right?
tell you when I was jumping rope, my goal was to, and it's harder than what you think, jumping rope. And that's probably why my knees started hurting. I got up to doing it like a minute or 2. And I didn't quite get to 2 minutes, and that's a lot of jumps. And harder than what you think. For push-ups, my goal was to do the 10 and start with upper body. Thank you for the compliments, ladies. I got, let's see, I'm up to doing push-ups for a minute. So that's probably, well, I do a little bit of a plank in the middle there. So we're up to 40 or 50. But, you know, the difference is I'm saving my knees. You know, I'm
and you're getting stronger.
Yeah. I'm getting stronger. I feel like I'm accomplishing a goal, and it actually did work. And to get me regulated back to doing it, like to get me focusing on, when we were talking about before, that's the benefit of doing this. It really does affect your focus, because you're putting your focus on what you can control. You know, we can't control the pandemic. We can't control what's going on in the world. We can control our habits and rituals and how they benefit us. We can control giving our brain a break so we can build up resilience. We can control adding extra time so we can add joy and happiness to our lives. You know, reminding ourselves that life is good, and that, you know, we can give ourselves a break to do that.
One of the things I think that was one of the most powerful things that you talked about in your original talk, and you're building on it today, is to have a routine. And I know that my husband had 2 friends who got into a little bit of trouble because they didn't create a routine. And, you know, they said, I'm working from home, I can work at any time. So what they were wind up doing was they were working through the night. And they just, because they thought, well, I don't have anything else to do. Do you know what I mean? And so they didn't establish the routines. Now, they say common sense isn't very common, but these are very smart guys, but they just got into trouble because they kind of thought, well, it doesn't really matter when I go to sleep, but it actually does.
Does matter.
And you talked about treat yourself like a baby, put yourself on a schedule. So let's go back a second and say, if you don't have a morning routine, you actually do have one, right? Is that what you said before?
That's what I think most people have. That's why I always pick out the morning routine, because most people have a strong morning routine, whether it's really long, like getting 3 kids out the door and to school and to work and all of those things. I know a lot of us aren't leaving for work anymore. If it doesn't have to be a current morning routine, it can be a past one, or if you have an evening routine that's really set in place. Everybody has one routine that they do without even thinking about it. That's why I normally pick the morning routine, because you have something you do when you get out of bed, whether it's going to the bathroom, getting coffee made, you have something that you don't even think about anymore. It's automated, and that's a ritual. So you have a morning ritual, rituals are basically just stacked up habits. And when they're automated, you don't even think about it anymore. So the gentleman that were saying that, oh, I don't have a routine, they have some form of routine. They're just not aware of it because they no longer think of it, because it's so automated, it's not present. If you were actually with them all day long, monitoring them, you could say, that's your routine. That's your routine. So that's why I always pick morning, because most people have a morning routine. And I think it's important, even if it's only a half an hour, 15 minutes, to monitor that and look at all the tasks that you do on it, because then you realize, I've done this before. And that's the point I'm trying to bring to people, is that I am helping you design it, but you basically have all the tools inside of you to do it. You've done this before. I'm just giving you a way to structure it, and then to improve it, and then to analyze it, and then move on from there. So you can evaluate it, improve your life, and then move on from there. It's behavior modification. It's not, there's something wrong with your behavior. It's basically up to you to say, what can I do with it? And then the extra time that you're going to be saving with your automation or the habits that you build up, that's your joy time, or your play time, or your resilience time, or your meditation time, or your whatever's bringing you something that's getting you through this other than worry. Yeah,
and I want to reinforce for everyone. I've talked to top yoga instructors and people that are really in the health and wellness field, and everyone's going through this. I'm forcing myself to go outside. I'm forcing myself to turn off the news. I'm forcing myself to keep with my routine and not fall into patterns that are not healthy. Vices versus are things that are good for us, right? And that's, I think you said it so well when you said, well, it feels good, so I want to repeat it. So we have to work with our biology, don't we? We have to work with the chemistry that we're given, right? And understand that it's not our fault, but it is our challenge, right?
Correct.
To be in a situation where there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of stress, and at the same time, we can prioritize positivity. And we can look for simple things, like I loved on Tuesday when she suggested, putting up a bulletin board when you're on Zoom that is close by, that has pictures of people that you love and situations where you were having a good time, just to remind yourself of those experiences. I mean, that's a simple thing to do from a design point of view, right? It's like, what I look at, it's like, it brings me joy.
True. And designing something that's for your future, like planning it now, working on it every day, and then don't give it a time frame, because obviously we don't know how this is going to go, but at least you're planning for something good when this all happens. Like, either you're going to be taking a trip, you're going to be a great dancer, you're going to be a better grandmother, whatever you're going to be. I think that's important too, to have a little bit of a future focus, because then you're basically reinforcing the fact that this is going to end, and it's going to be better when there's going to be part of it that's going to be better for me when it does.
Yeah,
And that is positivity.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maria Sorrell talks about that all the time, about we need to be thinking about the future and have hope for that. Sue Knight was saying, well, how to handle setbacks or lack of progress. And some of that I have found, and Rick, I wonder what your opinion about is like, how are you defining progress? How are you defining success?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was working with somebody and, you know, she was doing actually quite a lot, but it wasn't enough for her. So Sue, we would have to know a little bit more about what you mean by setbacks. Don't you think, Rick? And what's your thought about that?
Exactly. And then when we were talking about change as a turning point or a change point, like if I was going to view this as, you know, a design process, if you're doing something, even if it's phenomenal, structurally, beautifully, and all of that, and it's not working, then you realize it's not working, and there's a reason why it's not working. I don't know the specifics for this situation. Sometimes I think it's good to have an evaluation point at that and say, did I make a decision out of, you know, fear? Did I make a decision out of just, was I faking it till I make it? Was it willpower? Is it not really right for me? What if I designed something that was different and then try to do something in a different direction and see where it goes? I don't know which situation she's talking about, but sometimes if you fail, it's not really a failure because it's giving you a decision or giving you the information that it's not working for you. So, and I think that's a positive too, depending on what the situation is.
And we had another question about, how does brushing your teeth affect change?
Well, as my dentist says, I have very good height. He says, never forget to brush and floss and stuff like that, because your teeth actually affect your heart and the rest of your health as well. So doing simple things like in the morning, like everybody, you know, hopefully brushes their teeth. It is important because in the long run, if your teeth were failing, and what is that famous quote from Benjamin Franklin? You know, if we think about the modern world that we're living in, he said the world would change if we could just figure out how to get rid of a toothache. You know, let's be grateful for the world that we live in, that we have dentists that take care of things like toothaches. We don't have to live our life with rotting teeth anymore. You know, we're in a good place. And, you know, taking care of your teeth, brushing them, those boring habits do have long-term effects for your heart, who I never really, until my dentist mentioned it, I never realized flossing and brushing was really a benefit for your heart. But it is.
Yeah. And the other thing someone asked is, it might have been Lois again too, what about if you're in a studio apartment and your TV is by your bed? Would you design a cover for it? Would you say at a certain time that's what's going to happen?
You can do turn off times. You can do like what I did. You can, if it's affecting your sleep, you can do light switches that turn the lights off, turn the TV off. You can rearrange the furniture so you're not facing. You have like a couch or a chair facing the TV, but your bed's not. You know, something where you, I think for studios in particular, it's good to have places of action, eating, sleeping, you know, cooking, and then design those up specifically for that so you have functions for those. And if watching TV is a problem, make sure your bed, make sure all of the things aren't just facing the TV. So you can control your watching, you know, control your usage.
And then finally, Donna had a question. It sounded like your house was in Columbia County.
Yeah, Kinderhook, a little village called Kinderhook. Yeah.
She has a house in
Prairieville, yeah. Been there.
Been there. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm sure you miss it, but at the same time, it's nice to look forward to yet another.
Exactly, another adventure, yeah.
Another adventure. Well, speaking of adventures, you guys, Rick and I have been talking about creating a program in which we, what do we call it? Designing post-election joy. We feel like that there's going to be probably a need after the election, which way it goes, it doesn't matter. We're not going to know about the results of it for a while.
And ladies, help me out to come up with another term besides design trumps willpower for obvious reasons. And yes, please vote. And yes, I would love to do, what I would like to do is work with a group of people individually to understand what kind of habits and rituals they want to do, and then help and aid with that. So
yeah. And so we're going to put that in the books, and please be on the lookout for that. And I also put in the chat tonight, I will be interviewing former Broadway actress and author and creator of Ziva Meditation, Emily Fletcher, on stress in the brain. She's an amazing speaker. So I encourage you to I didn't catch who was on Prairieville. I am close. The person, if you look in the chat, the person that is on that Prairieville, I'll tell you, is, hang on, Donna Rich.
Yeah.
So we're making connections here at the JCC.
Yeah.
Well, outside of the of our purview. That's great. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ladies.
Design beats power.
I just
All right.
Beats willpower. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Willpower. Design beats willpower. All right, you guys. We could continue on. Please join me tonight, 5:15, if you would like, for Emily Fletcher's talk. She's amazing. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.